Welcome back to another one from Advanced in Car. This afternoon, Owen and I have been working on this 2016 T6 fitting factory cruise control. So obviously there's not a lot you can see physically apart from the stalk and things, so I'll just give you a kind of rough idea of how it's run and fitted, and then we'll show you where the stalk is and everything like that. Right then, so obviously these are the old stalks that have come off. Obviously in the left hand stalk there's no cruise or anything like that, whereas that's what we've now got. So in terms of how this is fitted, it's quite a labour intensive job in terms of the amount of time, just because of the areas you've got to work in, and also making sure that everything is pinned out correctly, because obviously once we've got the steering wheel off, the clock ring off, and then obviously we're going down to the BCM, we're pinning out in there, we're pinning out the BCM, and then we've also got to pick up ignition and also head over into the engine bay and pin out there. You've got to make sure that everything is, all those pins go in and get that good definite click, and everything is seated as it should do, because otherwise you can't test it until you put everything back together, and at that point you then go, oh, something's not working, got to take it all apart again. So obviously it's much better to make sure everything is done absolutely right the first time, but that just takes a bit of time. So as I said, the steering wheel has to all come off, so you can get all the stalks off, the clock spring off, what else, all the cowling off, everything, so you can get down to the main plug that plugs into the back of these stalks just here, so that we can then start pinning out the various pins that go in for the loom. Then we follow all of the factory loom that follows down through the steering column, obviously making sure we stay with the looms that allow the steering wheel to still adjust in and out, up and down, without obviously the cable getting snagged, because you don't want to be pulling on the steering column and then the loom being pulled taut or something like that because it's not been run properly. Then we'll take out all the clocks and everything, because then it makes our lives a lot easier for running the loom up behind and then along, so we can then drop back down into the BCM that is obviously fitted up sort of to the right of the pedals, if you like, in that kind of awkward position that it is in a T6. Then the various cables that need dropping into there, they then get pinned out. In this same area, we then pick up a good clean ignition cable, so that obviously once the ignition goes on, the cruise comes on. Doesn't need to be on a battery, because otherwise it'd be potentially on all the time, if you like. And then there's a lovely little grommet that's just above here that takes you through the bulkhead into the engine bay and then runs along. So we'll go and have a look in the engine bay, and I'll give you a rough idea of how we run it, so that you won't necessarily be able to see it, but you'll see the standard work that we kind of work towards. So following along in the same vein of having to take everything apart just to fit cruise, when we do this, we come through the grommet, like I said, into the little cubby area where the top of the shock mount is. We have to take off the wiper blades. We then take off the scuttle panel cover, so we can then get to, there's a loom that runs in, I'm not entirely sure what it's for, to be honest, but it runs along the back of the scuttle panel. So then what we're able to do is cable tie our loom all the way along that, and then over here, because obviously if you know your T6 or your 6.1 or your 5.1, they're all exactly the same, you have two removable panels. So we then remove this panel, and there's a grommet at the back which we can then run our cable down through, and then we have to get into this area so that we can get to the E-box. Now the E-box is it's a big watertight box basically that sits underneath the battery and the battery tray, and it has all the various main relays, large fuses, and there's a whole bank of plugs that we have to get into and run our cruise cable into. So from factory, 5.16s have the cruise cable already pinned in on one side of the plug, and we're adding the cable that's going to talk to that plug basically. So we then have to make sure we run the cable all the way around, again cable tying to factory looms as closely and as neatly as we can, so that nothing gets snagged, because obviously we quite often have to deal with things like this, lovely loose cables everywhere. It's delightful. But we had to make sure all those things don't come loose if they're already there and things, and we make sure we don't run our cables like that because it's not the prettiest. But yes, so then we find there's a side grommet that heads off into the E-box. And then we just put a nice little tight hole in that so that stays nice and watertight, because obviously don't want any water getting in there. And then, like I said, run our cable in and pin it out. But obviously, as I said earlier, with Cruise, it's fun because the amount of stuff you have to have apart, you can't test it to make sure it's right until you've put all of this back in, because obviously the battery has to be disconnected. So it's a fun one. So it's pretty labour intensive. I think it's taken us about 4 hours today. I think there's 2 of us working on it, and we're pretty good at what we do nowadays. Pretty on top of it. Owen's learned the job well, done a good job with it. So yeah, we're going to have a look at the stalk, talk you through how the stalk works, how it works. Unfortunately, because this one's got a low line disc on it, you can't see it activating on there, but I can still talk you through it. Right then, so this is the new stalk here. As you can see on the top, it has an on, a cancel and an off. Obviously if the switch is in off, then Cruise isn't going to work. And you can use the switch to cancel Cruise when it's in use, or you just dib the brake and it will automatically turn the Cruise off. On the side, you've then got your set and your resume. So the set you would obviously use once you're at your speed. So obviously in the UK we have 1,000,001 50-mile-an-hour average speed zones. So once you hit your 50, you then press set, and then because, like I said, this has the low line disc. Actually, tell you what, I'll show you it quickly so you know. Let's turn the radio down. So we know this is a low line disc because it has the half moon petrol gauge, which means unfortunately you get limited trip functionality, and you can't have things like big digital speedo and things like that. But when Cruise is activated on here and you press set or resume, you'll then get a little green symbol up here, which is the Cruise symbol but in green. And unfortunately, because of the low line disc, it means you can't see the speed that the Cruise is set to. So you just have to watch your needle basically. So yes, you would set it at the speed you want, you'd then carry along, and then if you wanted to increase your speed from there, you can just press the top one. If you press it one press at a time, I think it does a mile an hour or 2 at a time. If you press and hold, it tends to jump in either 3s or 5s. And then it'll just accelerate up to wherever it is you want it. And then, as I said, you could either cancel it on the switch, or you could press your brake and that would cancel the Cruise. Once you then get back to an area where you want to cruise at that preset speed again, you would then hit resume. Your green light would come on and the car would either accelerate up to that speed or decelerate down to that speed. And that's basically it really. That's how the Cruise on a stalk works, and also how kind of involved the job is, so you can get an idea of what's involved when we do it. So if you wanted to have a bash at it, you could do, but I totally understand if you looked at it and went, no, I don't want to do that, thanks, there's a lot to come apart. So that's about it really. Cruise on a T6, we do it a lot, and if you've got a T6 or 5.1 that you would like Cruise on, or you've got a T6 or 5.1 or T6.1 that you'd like many other things on, you've probably seen lots of our other videos about transporters and things, have a whole plethora of items and things you can have. So get in touch, fill out the contact form, give us all your details and things about your van so we know what it can have, and also what you'd like, and then we'll go from there. Keep checking out all the socials, find the website and everything in the description. I think that's everything I need to say, isn't it? Yeah, probably. Anyway, right, thanks for watching, see you again soon.